Senator Jim Talent used to represent Missouri in the United States Senate. And now he's actually shown up on Dwayne's World, Dwayne's new podcast. And I played Dwayne's World music because I just want to say, Senator, having to put up with Dwayne for a full length conversation, I greatly admire your chops of going on Dwayne's World. Is the headache over yet? Has it passed?
Yeah, well, I'm doing fine. I just wonder how Dwayne is doing, having to deal with me for 20 or 25 minutes when we do the show together.
Well, I just want to know when we just had a shot at Dwayne. The glare from the forehead just makes me crazy. All right. Anyway, Senator, my big question: Thune is running against Cornyn. I know both men; they're both friends. They come on the show a lot. I have no dog in this fight. Neither do you. How does anyone make a choice when you have two superb senators of great experience who are Reagan conservatives, both of them? I mean, how do you choose?
Yeah, leadership races are often very difficult, you. And what Olivia said is correct. A lot of it will come down with, I think, particularly in this race, because they'll both make very fine leaders. I mean, John Cornyn was in my class when we went in the Senate together, and I've known John Thune for 30 years. He was on the Small Business Committee in the House with me in the 90s when I chaired the committee.
Oh my gosh, boy, do you have conflicts.
Yeah, exactly. They're both outstanding people. I think a lot of it is going to come down to things like personal knowledge and contacts. I think it'll come down to things like the issues you think they would naturally prioritize given where they're from. Okay, so John is I can't use the word John. So Thune is a small state, heavily agricultural state, northerner. Um, Cornyn, of course, is a Texan. So it'll come down to things like that. On the one hand, when you get the Texans, they're great at raising money. I mean, they have great political instincts. On the other hand, how many Texans do you want involved in the leadership running things? So I think it's going to come down to things like that. But I really want to reassure your listeners that whoever we get is going to be an outstanding leader, and we really need somebody like that. McConnell's shoes are difficult to fill, obviously, but either one of them can do it.
And I had guessed that you were going to tell me, well, if John Cornyn wins, X gets to become the chairman of this committee, which means Y gets to be the chairman of that committee, and Z becomes this committee. But if Thune wins, X becomes this chair, Y goes here, and Z goes there. Because there's stuff I just don't know that depends upon the very arcane seniority rules.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the House. Okay, so it's not like if in a speaker's race, there's a lot of truth to that, although actually decisions are made by the steering committee. The speaker has
Correct.
disproportionate influence, but he doesn't control it. Okay, but in the Senate, that's done by seniority. So it's more going to be a question of in terms of how they do the job. And Olivia mentioned this, and she's right. How effective are they at herding the cats in the Senate? How much do the colleagues trust them?
Oh, that's good. Trust is a big deal. I wanted to go very quickly to my sense that the engine has fallen off the Harris campaign. And I think the numbers that came in from CNN yesterday, like McCormick being tied in Pennsylvania, the Sean Hannity, Donald Trump event in Harrisburg last night, JD's interview with me, I just think momentum has completely left the Democrats. And I'm trying not to be a homer here. I'm not trying to make wish father to the deed. What do you think objectively?
Well, I think your predictions are coming true, and I think they were very sound. I like the way you have focused on Dave McCormick because I think he's going to help Trump in Pennsylvania. That could be the subject of a whole interview. He's clearly, he's running for the second time. He's surrendered to the race, as I call it. He's working very hard. My major concern is I think the Trump campaign should plan on the assumption that this upcoming debate will be the most biased debate in terms of the moderators that we've ever seen. And so I am not all a bowl of cherries over this debate. It's tough if the moderators really are determined to get you. It's tough to handle a debate. Now that's your area more than mine. But
well, I think the best response, Jim, I think if that comes to pass, ABC will lose its credibility. I hope you'll stay with me over the break, and we'll bring Dwayne in at the top of the hour. The best response to that is for Donald Trump to ask questions of the moderators, not of the vice president. David, are you ever going to ask her about the fact that when she was named to run the border, she was charged with stemming the flow? Are you ever going to ask her how many people are in the country illegally? Are you ever going to ask her if she's going to close the detention centers? Are you ever going to ask her about Medicare for all? I'd do it every time for 90 minutes. You get 45 minutes. I would just ask the moderators questions to ask her. What do you think? Thumbs up or down on that approach?
Yeah, I think that's a very good tactic. And Donald Trump is a good debater, and I think he's measurably a better candidate this time around. I've been watching him. He uses humor better, he explains better, he pivots better. That's a lot to ask, though. I mean, for a man who's campaigning every day, there are ways of dealing with it, but it's a high bar, it's a high hill for him to climb.
I'm going to bring Dwayne into the conversation during the break. We'll post it all over at my YouTube channel, which you can find via HHS links on X, or Hugh Hewitt on X. Stay tuned. Jim Talent is Jim Talent on X. I'm back now with Senator Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri, former House member from Missouri. And now I'm going to bring in Generalissimo because he's the host of Dwayne's World, our new podcast. Jim, just honestly tell me, how bad was it? I mean, was it being like dragged behind a truck to go on Dwayne's World, or was it like your boat capsizing, or was it like a particularly painful dentist appointment?
I have to tell you, my experience every time I've done the show is that the time goes by incredibly fast. I mean, I look down at my computer and my gosh, we tape these things at around 4 o'clock my time on Tuesday afternoons, and I look down at the clock on my computer, and there it is. It's 4:35. It's 4:40. Although we've had to be more careful since you went to the new format, because I think I'm limited to like 25 minutes, but it goes by like a snap. I mean, I'm searching
Does
for
he
ways.
stick to the questions I give him? I give him questions for you every week. I just want to know if he's sticking to the script.
I think I can say with confidence that he asks whatever he damn well wants to ask.
Yes, he damn well does, doesn't he?
Jim,
I'm pretty
now
sure
this is a question about.
In fact, you at the beginning of the last taping, at the beginning of the last taping, he said, "Well, this is a place where I get to ask what I want to ask." Or he said something like that, didn't you, Dwayne? I think you did.
Yep. I started the last episode by saying, Hugh's got highly concentrated Hugh. He's got the Hughiverse. Right. He's got the Hugh Hewitt Show. He's got plenty of he writes columns for Fox News. He's got plenty of venues with which to opine what he thinks about things. This is my time. This is
still the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is my time for Jim to answer to both of us. I have a theory that podcasting is going to be the final blow at legacy media. Blogs arose and disintermediated a lot of legacy media in the early aughts. Then they got overtaken by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the three that survived. And they took in all the subscribers and the blogs fell. Now podcasting is there. And I listen to Commentary Pod, the editors. I listen to Getting Hammered. I listen to Dan Senor every single episode. And I think podcasting, like Dwayne's World, is new. It's absolutely new. And highly concentrated Hugh's been around for a year or so. What do you think, Jim Talent? Does podcasting present a mortal threat to legacy media?
Yeah, I think that's a very plausible hypothesis, Hugh, and I'm not trying to dodge the question. I just think with developments in internet-based media, there's constantly new things. But the obvious advantage of it is that the people who want to can tune in and get a more in-depth discussion than you're ever going to get on legacy media, particularly the way they run legacy media. I mean, and I do think the bias of it. I mean, I think if you want, for example, I mean, the polls show that legacy media still has credibility with a lot of Democrats. But I think if you had a cup of coffee with many of those Democrats, they would say, well, yeah, if they were telling me a fact on something that mattered to me outside of politics. In other words, I think they're watching the shows that that have a message that is consistent with their worldview, which is perfectly reasonable. I mean, everybody does that, but that doesn't mean that they trust them on issues of fact outside of that that are important to them. I hope that makes some sense. So I think they've really hurt their credibility. I think they go so far, you, that it hurts the Democrats. I mean, I made this point on the pod that if they had not been so sycophantic to Biden for 4 years, they would not be in this mess with Harris, because Biden couldn't have run again.
Let me get Dwayne in here. Dwayne, I don't know what the pickup rate on Dwayne's world is. It took off like a rocket, but I think it's because you talk to people like Jim Talent, who I never see on cable. I don't know if that's your choice, Jim, or if cable just doesn't want a serious Reagan conservative.
He's
wrestling.
like my own personal poli-sci professor. And it's the greatest thing in the world to have him on every week, being the color commentator for what's going on. I would add to the conversation, by the way, in regards to media. I think that legacy media is its own mortal threat to legacy media. Picking up on what Jim said about their bias, they've hurt their own credibility with enough of a chunk of the American population that I think every time they swim in this tank, they're doing themselves in. They're doing my job of trying to separate from media and being a more credible source. My job is a lot easier every time Dana Bash does an interview like she did.
So, Senator, last question. I call you Senator, by the way. He calls you Jim. I just want you to note that.
That's because we're friends.
I'm polite to my guests. Senator, do you think it's because Americans crave substance, or is it because of bias? I think it's the former. I think they want to hear you. You're running national security studies at the Reagan Foundation. I think they want to know what's going on without a lens. That's what I think is why podcasting is taking off.
Well, first of all, I have to say, the reason I did your show, and I'm grateful to be invited on and have continued to do it, even though I don't do a lot. I do radio sometimes, but I don't do a lot outside of that, is because you are, the best broad-based interviewer on national security issues that I think is in the media today. You're the best read. You ask the best questions. And I think a lot of people do your show for that reason. I think Cotton does. I think there's a lot of people who do. Yeah, I do think that podcasting, because it allows an in-depth discussion, and because I think a big part of the reason it goes around the mainstream media that people don't trust anymore. If you look at issues like, let's just take the pandemic, that should never have been a partisan issue and largely should not have been a political issue. And I think the media's handling of the pandemic, which directly affected people's lives, we could go down the issue, and Dwayne's heard me rant on this 100 times. I think it was terrible. I mean, just one thing, the way they suppressed really distinguished voices like Jay Bhattacharya, Sunetra Gupta.
Number one, Jay Bhattacharya. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, and that I couldn't even see the political reason for that, particularly once the election was over. And they did it. And, all those folks better than I do. But they used to be professional. By and large, they used to be well-read. I mean, they understood the beat they were covering. And I really question whether they do now. And I don't say that with any malice. I mean, I really don't.
I do. I agree with you. I think they're too young. I don't think they know anything. And I think podcasting is a palatable alternative